Hey guys. This is, I know we're all starting to wind down. Jamie, thank you. Festival has been awesome, really, in every sense of the word. You've, I've only once spoken briefly in front of Jamie in a LA house about Route 66 because my book's not finished, but Jamie loves the topic and he's been a great encourager. And the first thing to know is that the Mother Road, as John Steinbeck called it in Grapes of Wrath, other people call it America's Main Street, it will be having its centennial. It was opened on November 11th, 1926. It was game-changing. We had no federal roads. World War I ate up all of our funding and also aviation extra money. Starting in 1921, there became a move to create federal highways. Why? Because the Model T came out in 1908 and everybody was stuck in mud roads or complaining they're in the frozen weather, you couldn't move, yet cars were being sold and being sold in record numbers. And there became a bid, and the bids became, they were supposed to only be round numbers, 10, a Highway 20, Highway 30, 40, 50, 60. When they got to 60, a huge brouhaha occurred because Kentucky and Tennessee wanted 60 to go from their states to the west. And cleverly, two entrepreneur business people, Cyrus Avery of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and John Woodruff of Springfield, Missouri, weighed in and cut a deal. They said, we'll take the rogue number 66. And we have to have the two great American cities connected, Chicago and Los Angeles. And when we're looking, the map you just saw goes through 8 states, Route 66. And it's, there you can see the red line just going. It dips, it goes. It chooses its route by counties and towns that think they can benefit, meaning local chambers that can get the tourists, get the drivers here. And quite naturally, when Route 66 opened, you had to also have gas stations, filling stations, car repairs, and then what became from manor courthouses to the modern-day motel, motortel business, which sprung up, and plus all of these eateries. It's become the great iconic road. You could go to that next one. There are 1,000 posters of something like that. Question for me, driving it, taking students down Route 66, where does it begin? It basically begins at Buckingham Fountain in Chicago, but it's at Grant Park, right downtown on the lakefront. And the real beginning now for a trip is the Ferris wheel. It's called the Centennial Wheel in Chicago on a pier, and it ends Route 66 at the Santa Monica Pier in California. Ferris wheels, guys, is an American invention. A man, Mr. Ferris, from downstate Illinois, came in and met with architect John Burnham with his weird blueprints that he was going to build a massive wheel in 1893 Columbian Exhibition, and that wheel was going to be the Eiffel Tower of America. And people said you can't build the wheel engineering-wise, but they looked into it and they went with it. And that wheel in 1893, much came out of that White City World's Fair in 1893 of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer or Cracker Jack or Aunt Jemima's pancakes, all these like foodstuffs came out of it. But the Ferris wheel was the hit. And soon after, they started opening up all over the country for county fairs. It became the ride in America, and a lovely ride at that. Imagine in 1890s, pre-aviation era, you're now coming to Chicago and you get to go on a giant loop and look out and see the vast blue of Lake Michigan and see the buildings at night. And it captured the romance of America. The fair did not end well. There's great stories about it we don't have time for due to people getting sick and due to some of the segregation that was there. But beyond the wheel, if you go right now to where the marker is in Chicago, it's boring. It's a Starbucks, and the Starbucks doesn't, I don't know why Starbucks can't hang pictures or maps. It's all the green, beige, oatmeal colored. I mean, here they are, the Starbucks, right at where Route 66 began, and they can't do any kind of 66 memorabilia or gear because it's not part of corporate philosophy. I would blow that and turn that into a 66 Starbucks in a heartbeat. You would have it as a site. But what does attract people turn around from, and there are the two giant imposing stone lions in front of the Art Institute of America. And you walk up those steps, and if you go in and get your ticket and go to the back, the painting that was just there by Georgia O'Keeffe is Sky Above Cloud Number 4. It is O'Keeffe painted it in 65, later in life, she's approaching 80. It's her largest canvas of Georgia O'Keeffe ever. It's massive, it's billboard size. She put it in her garage in New Mexico and worked with the rattlesnake nest. She would climb ladders, and she worked on it. She had one assistant eat sandwiches and painted it because she wanted to. She had seen it's ethereal painting. It shows you maybe those clouds are stepping stones, not only to a horizon, maybe eternity. There's no religious message to it. It does build off of Mark Rothko's abstract, expressionism and others. But the sheer size of it, and really, I realized when I saw it, not only she grew up in Wisconsin, but she went to the Art Institute. And then she lived before New Mexico on Route 66, teaching in Canyon, Texas. Lived in Amarillo, which is right on the road. And she started all of her nature paintings of the great Georgia O'Keeffe on 66. And that became her road. She would take a Ford and go back and forth and eventually move permanently to New Mexico, where you visit her studio and the like. San Francisco Museum of Art was going to move that for her retrospective they wanted to do in the 70s. It can't fit out of the museum. They don't know how to get it out now. So it's kind of permanently stuck on the whole back wall. And the truth is, I think it's Joan Gideon would go there with her kids to pay honor to it. She loved it so much. And she writes about it in the White Album. But the point is that a lot of 66 in America is about the sky, the open sky. I mean, and what else do we talk about Chicago? Skyscrapers and looking up. The beauty of 66 isn't just, and I'll talk about a neon motel or wigwam, TP Inn or something. Those are fun, but when you drive and you see that vastness of the West, it still is a great feeling. And she now took flying and started first time seeing it like above, like being actually above the clouds. While you go to Art Institute, I was trying to figure out what kind of book I'm writing, because I love William Elise Heat Moon's Blue Highways, memoir about travel America. I love John Steinbeck, or in the Steinbeck, has his, here the room, but the Travels with Charlie, where he drove all over with his dog, the country, a poodle, and observed on it. I love just movement books as old as Francis Parkman and the Oregon Trail. There's so many color picture books out there in 66, guidebooks, apps. But in this, I got inspired at the Art Institute by Andy Warhol. These are all hung together. Because my early dilemma, guys, is I just can't do Chuck Berry rock and roll and get your kicks on Route 66. 50% of the counties on those 8 states were sundown counties. If you were black, you couldn't be out or get arrested or go to jail. Along this route are cities like Springfield, Illinois, where the famous race riot and lynchings of black people took place in 1908, and that's what gave birth to the NAACP, was the Springfield riot. East St. Louis, where Miles Davis was born, horrible riots. Tulsa, we've all been talking about in 1921. So my challenge in my mind was, I got to deal with those things, but I also want to deal with the joy and celebration of what we love about Route 66. And there Warhol, close in time in the 60s, nailed it. And the curator there, Liz Taylor #3, celebrity, pop culture, the love our country has for it. And on 66, you'll see paintings of, or statues of John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. You'll see John Wayne blown up big. It got renamed the Will Rogers Highway in 1965. It's very driven on the pop culture celebrities, just like the Marilyn Monroe statue in Palm Springs. And that he loved her. He thought if he could be anybody, he wanted to be Liz Taylor. He brought that down Route 66. Warhol drove and said, I want to move nowhere else but America because of Route 66. He saw the blinking signs, the advertising, the way we used art in advertising, which Warhol believed should be one from his perch of the factory in New York. So that's all happy. And of course, the big one he did is Elvis Presley, double Elvis. These are paintings, guys, going for $200 million now. I mean, Warhol's like this. The middle one, that is what deals, in my mind, dealt with the race riots, the ugly side. That's the electric chair the Rosenbergs were executed in. And it has the dangling strap, and Warhol became the guy who most promoted the death chair was Thomas Edison. Buffalo had a war between Westinghouse and Edison who was going to mass market the electric chair. And it's Warhol's way of looking and putting it there, the starkness of just seeing it sitting there, and he did a couple color versions of it. And he also did it became part of his Death in Disaster series. He did car crashes, airplane crashes, assassinations, gangsters in Death in Disaster series. Right when everybody's like, oh my God, Warhol's doing Death in Disasters, to the surprise of the art world, he turned to flowers. Beautiful series of flowers where it was beginning of appropriation art. He would take a photograph that he liked from a Home and Garden magazine and things, and then he would use his silkscreen project and do this whole series, Flower Power, kind of the 60s. And what I'm trying to say is the early writer, Thomas Wolfe, said there are a billion forms of America. We have all these things going on. And where Warhol's doing three, Death and Disaster, the ugly side, the celebrity side that people love, the Hollywood side, the movie, and the natural world. So he, as an artist, he's showing us America. He's one of the kings of Americana. And Warhol kept a diary of his journeys down Route 66. He'd stay at all the motels. He loved the pre-Vegas stuff. Keep in mind, we could flip to the next one. Keep in mind, it's fate. Route 66 opened in 1926, right when in France it got imported to us neon art. And there used to be neon artists with glass blowing and all, and that's what Warhol loved, that neon art. You know, here you're dealing, there's not even in 1920, when Route 66 opened, there's no electricity in so much of the country, but where you'd get a pocket, some diner would buy or get an artist to do a neon sign. And for farmers, it was like, oh my God, look, those bright neon colors in the middle of a county in Kansas. I mean, it was very mind-bending. And now people are doing art illumination at every museum, the Broad or, pick Palm Springs, pick your great museum. But it was the neon art that started connecting to Route 66. In Chicago, you could do any ethnic group. For a while, I wanted to write about the novelist Saul Bellow and a Chicago Jewish Americans there. This is the Chicago music scene. I don't know if you realize it, Chicago was where country western was huge. There was no Nashville. Nashville had Hank Williams. It was all country being broadcast out of Chicago. But these three became revolutionary at approximately the same time. Nat King Cole on the far right there. Let me tell you, Nat King, there's a neighborhood, guys, if there's one thing you could take from the day, there's a neighborhood in Chicago called Bronzeville. And within a 10-block walking radius of brownstones is where Mahalia Jackson lived, Lou Rawls, Herbie Hancock, Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke, Chuck Berry, and then blues, Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Quincy Jones is from Bronzeville. It's an endless list of music talent from the black community there. It's also where the gospel music of today is created by Thomas E. Dorsey. Because in the Great Migration, Dorsey came up and you couldn't mix blues and sacred music, but he did extra money. He'd go to the bars at night and do Delta blues guitar, but then he'd do sacred music as the straight preacher. But over time, he put them together and created the mass gospel music movement right at the mouth of Route 66. Thousands of songs like Peace in the Valley and endless, well, my Lord's Prayer. They're ubiquitous. So he's there too. But Nat King Cole grew up there, was so handsome, dressed well, had a voice like a god, and was one of the great pianists who ever lived. The Nat King Cole trio, like when he would play with Lester Young and Buddy Rich, stunning music. But he then wanted to make more money. There was a feeling that he could become the next Sinatra or Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole. And he would drive out to back and forth Chicago to LA. I'm talking young. He's like now 18, 19, 20. And he started getting some radio play, but it was still kind of race records, but he was breaking through. And in 1946, right after World War II, a Marine named Bobby Troop and his wife Cynthia drove from Pennsylvania to LA on Route 66, the 2-lane paved road, and he pulled into where Nat King Cole was recording, and he begged Cole to let him hear the song he just wrote, Get Your Kicks on Route 66. Bobby Troop wrote it, he played it for Nat King Cole, and Cole's like, done. Day later, he recorded it in a take. And it's a catchy tune, it fits that post-war enthusiasm for the automobile. Remember cars, gasoline, tires, banned really in World War II. So it wasn't a time for consumer culture. And now Nat King Cole saying it's fun, get your kicks on Route 66, go to California. Meanwhile, in the World War II, Route 66 was known as the Khaki Highway because all of the armed forces would go up and down. That was the only big road investment in money during World War II is 66 to connect LA. So you have Patton's desert bed here, you train and then move and connect to the Great Lakes, to the Pacific, and all over Fort Leonard Wood in, Missouri, Germans poured into Texas at POW camps where they were treated better than Latinos and blacks there. But now with Cole, it was, this is fun, this is adventure. We can have good times again. Following Nat King Cole, historic guys, first black person to have television show, 15 minutes, NBC, variety show. Nobody in the South would sponsor him. They boycotted his NBC show because he was black. They had to get rid of him, but he played with a white musician and went to Alabama. And on stage like this, playing in front of an all-white audience, a group of Proud Boy types of today came on stage and started beating Nat King Cole. Because he was black and playing with a white musician. They raced him to the hospital there. They found that his was bloody, but it wasn't vital. And he said, I want to play a midnight show in front of an all-black audience. And he then went and played Wounded, his set there. I mentioned he moved it out in LA. He had a KKK cross put on him. It's ironic because he's really an Eisenhower Republican like Jackie Robinson was. He did not march with Dr. King. He did not have leftist politics, like Harry Belafonte. But he still got targeted. And then he stayed with it and became the pop hero. You all know him from, the Christmas, chestnuts roasting on an open fire and, wearing the sweater and all. But he was a great musician and complicated man, and he wanted to make money, and he did. And he died, unfortunately, at a young age in the 60s. He's buried at Woodlawn, right by this guy, Sam Cooke, same cemetery. Sam Cooke, same Bronzeville. Sam Cooke, I Send You, and all of the great songs that he wrote out of Chicago as a young kid. He got, he was hot. He had like 50 #1 hits in a row. He was crossing over to white audiences, Sam Cooke. He's undeniably talented. But he heard Bob Dylan's song, Blowin' in the Wind, and he was mad at himself because he never wrote a protest song or something like that. And he'd listen to that song over and over again, and he had writer's block. But in London, he felt like he broke the block, and he wrote the great song, A Change Is Gonna Come, which, in A Change Is Gonna Come, he recorded it and was dead. He never was alive for when the album came out. We have no live version of it. He did it once on the NBC Tonight Show, premiered it, and nobody could find the footage. So we don't have it. But now if you go to Library of Congress, it's like the top song on the National Register. It's like Over the Rainbow or something. It is like part of the fabric of America, so much so that when Barack Obama gave his victory speech at Grant Park, after he won the presidency that night in 2008, in his speech, he's quoting Sam Cooke. Change is going to come, and change is here, And it became a moving anthem of civil rights. I was Rosa Parks' biographer, and she had told me how she processed Dr. King's assassination, was playing that song over and over again. It's just haunting and beautiful, the voice. He got killed off of Route 66, Sam Cooke, at the Hacienda Motel, where he went to a hotel room with a woman he met at a bar. The story gets convoluted, but when he went to a bathroom, she ran off with his pants and wallet, fled. He went out looking for her, barged into the office of the motel, little neon motel, and the woman behind the counter pulled a gun and shot him in the chest 3 times, and said the last words were, "Lady, you shot me." Dead. And the funeral for Sam Cooke you couldn't even get to when they did it back in Chicago. People had to push people over. There was that big of crowd for him. Muhammad Ali spent a lifetime feeling there's been a cover-up on the death of Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was angering people because he insisted on running his own label, owning all of his own original songs, and refused to work without having utter control. And he may have fallen in with a lack of a better word, a mafia type out in LA, either owed money or something, but there was sort of a vendetta against one of the sweetest humans. His radicalization was he tried to check into a motel, Sam Cooke, with his wife, and they wouldn't let him in the motel room because he was black, and he got angry. They then went to a black-only motel, and police came and put him in jail, and it was in the New York Times. Singer Sam Cooke. To move this along, Chuck Berry's the last one up there's Berry's from St. Louis. Chuck Berry invented rock and roll or close to it. Unbelievable electric guitar player. Every one of his songs. I got to know him as a friend. I used to take students on a Magic Bus trip around America. Everybody told me how hard and nasty Chuck Berry is. He's not easy. He's irascible. Found him to be a mensch because there were 2 of them. There's Charles Berry, and that's what I got. I'd go out for dinner with Charles and his daughter Ingrid and his wife and his mistress together. I did. They were a team. And I once wrote something in the Wall Street Journal talking about T.S. Lewis, but I said Chuck Berry actually writes poetry. I was stretching it a little because he was not, on some of it, but I gave an example. I argued it, and he caught wind of it and he's like, hey, I'm a poet. This guy finally gets, and he wrote all of these own original songs when he was hot. Maybelline, Move Over, Beethoven, and give Tchaikovsky the news. And he defines being a badass, And he would only get paid cash in a brown paper bag. He did not trust managers, did not trust anybody. and it was hard. And he went to jail for stealing car to go down Route 66 because he wouldn't sit in a segregated bus. He's a blowtorch guy, a handful. They've just put a big statue for Chuck Berry up in St. Louis and are starting to really treat what it meant to have him there, you know, because he was a pioneer of rock and roll, same period. Okay, let's move on then. Look, everybody sees Al Capone in his gangster suits, and I promise you there's hundreds of gangster Al Capone photos. Just pick this one with him in Florida by Mar-a-Lago. He moved right down there, near there, and Capone, but when bad things would happen in Chicago that he was a mastermind of, like the St. Valentine's Day massacre, his alibi was, I couldn't be involved, I'm in Florida. But Capone capitalized on Route 66 because what's 1926 when it opens? Prohibition. No booze, no liquor, everything's cut. So he makes his fortune fighting the feds. And it wasn't the FBI of today, it was more broken down. It was when J. Edgar Hoover was a piker, you know. And Capone recognized in Chicago, heavy Catholic, where they drink wine, alcohol, Italian communities, they wanted liquor. And he used the paved Route 66 as his getaway to distribute alcohol from St. Louis to Chicago. They'd smuggle it in from the Great Lakes. Southern Illinois was moonshine stills and backcountries, brewing stuff. The word rot gut comes out of all of this from Capone. Some of Capone's booze could kill you because it wasn't done. It didn't have any, safety regulations. Some was great, some was mixed badly, like fentanyl today, right? And he becomes a folk legend because they can't get him, just like Trump couldn't get 34 felony counts and he's now president. Capone became the outlaw figure. It became nobody could get him. They arrest him, he gets out. They only eventually busted him for tax evasion, where he goes 7 years in jail. But they had him on everything under the sun, and he would pay off police all the time. He made the smart decision. He moved right on Route 66 out of Chicago to Cicero, Illinois, right on 66. You can go there today, and there's a car wash, and that was where his headquarters was. He owned the city of Cicero. He owned the police. Police get shot if they weren't on the Capone payroll. He ran elections. He became an authoritarian figure of Cicero, Illinois, and used racism a lot because it was a recent immigrants of Lithuania and Estonia there, Poland, and he was doing where you might be new, but you're white, and that's the most nasty, worst town, Cicero, if you're black. They would, you couldn't rent an apartment if you tried. It became a race riot, which happened there in 51 in Cicero. The big factory, Western Electric, is on Route 66 in Cicero. They moved to make all of our telephones and radios of World War I to Cicero to avoid labor unions, and particularly the Wobblies that were working at going after companies in Chicago. And so Capone, by the time he dies, he begins as a folk hero and he continues. Donald Trump evokes him all the time. Trump says, I'm part of the outlaw tradition. I mean, people love Al Capone more than William Henry Harrison. Who cares about Franklin Pierce when you got Al Capone? He sees him as a celebrity, like Warhol did with things. I think Capone represents that side. And it was against Uncle Sam. It was people felt their rights were taken away to drink alcohol. And of course, FDR will lift prohibition, and the FBI and special agents really eventually with that are able to control Capone. But the image lives on with Robert De Niro movies. It lives on. Michael Jackson wrote 2 songs about Al Capone, and it just goes on in folk culture. All right, next one. I mentioned these two, and as you leave Chicago to Cicero and all, the new road where old 66 is called I-55, Illinois to St. Louis. It's officially the Barack Obama presidential highway, I-55. Obama's victory speech I mentioned, his bravery was to hold the speech in Grant Park, which was the symbol of the 1968 Democratic convention run amok, Mayor Daley's police and beatings and Black Panthers and SDS and yippies and all of that, and the park was cursed. Pope John Paul II came to do a mass there that worked well, but Obama chose it as his place because it was the living room of Chicago, the Art Institute in Grant Park. 250,000 people, not one arrested during his great victory speech, or Jesse Jackson, who he disliked immensely. Always remember, Obama goes with the legacy of John Lewis, not Jesse Jackson, even though he lived in Chicago and Jesse Jackson was the power there, and Jackson ran to president before. Next one. Esther Bubbly, you're not going to be able to see this well, but during the New Deal period, and you know how everybody got along, most underrated thing at the home front, Greyhound buses. She got hired to only photograph buses and bus series of everything, and there are thousands and thousands of what it was like being on a bus. Greyhound had moved from Hibbing to Chicago and then used Route 66 to set up bus stations all over, some of them streamlined, modern, or Googie architecture, and most are closed now, the Chicago one. And endless photos of just what it looks like. There's just, you're seeing servicemen, with family or spouses there at the train station there. That's Chicago. See white waiting room, even Chicago, for the to get on the Greyhound to Chattanooga, because that's Chattanooga. And they're showing people would sleep on the buses, that you'd get a pillow service and all. But she, as a social documentarian, she did an incredible job of capturing a forgotten part of the war, the bus, what Greyhound had meant, the heyday during the 1940s. And she also was deeply involved with her Jewish faith, and it had a really interesting photography career, worth knowing about her, looking her up. Next one. Once you go into downstate Illinois, this is what you start seeing the rest of the way. Early neon from 1926, still existing. Just steaks, chicken, seafood, Luna Cafe, the Arrow, and then the martini glass. This red, if prostitutes were working there, they put it the red cherry. And when they weren't there, it would go dark. And it was a famous spot because it got located there. And it's still there, running like that. I mean, not the prostitution part, I don't think, but the Funks Grove, Illinois, typical of 66. A family for 150 years has been making their own syrup there. They spell it syrup, S-I-R-U-P, from the most intact grove of maple trees in the Midwest that they save in conservation. But people will buy this like caviar. Like if you get a bottle of Funk's Grove, it's like the top of the maple syrup chain. And it's been family run forever, and people love that, when you hit it there. Cozy's Drive-In is down at Springfield. I put that in because it tells you how proprietary cities get. There is a battle that you guys don't know about where the corn dog was born in America. I am siding with Springfield, Missouri. But the reason Texas claims it, but Texas had the corn dog but didn't put it on a stick. They were the stick people, and they said, well, it's not a corn dog if it's not on a stick. And then lately, Oregon's kind of claimed we're the home of it. Why would somebody care or do all that? It draws business. People think it's the birthplace of the corn dog. We got to pull over and, try to get one. And it becomes, of course, a staple at county fairs like the Ferris wheel. Let's go to the next one. Look, America likes largesse, large, the biggest, all of 66. It could be the biggest of anything, the biggest pail, the biggest shovel, the biggest moon tower, the big picket. It's on Route 66 to draw people to stop. And just examples, the world's largest ketchup bottle. These big statues were made for muffler companies, and they overmade some, so some people bought them for other things. And this one got turned into a Gemini man when the Gemini space program. was popular. So you could take a photo next to the gym. And the name of the cafe that it stands in front of is called the Launching Pad. So these huge statues, and the big one is Paul Bunyan's are everywhere. And I just saw one pixelated. I show my wife Ann, who's doing the slides right now with my friend Beth Lasky. But last night, it was just up, there's a giant Paul Bunyan muffler man like that, but instead of holding the rocket, he's holding a hot dog. And it's to draw you into the hot dog. But now in a woke PC move, they pixelated the face because they're saying it's a sexual thing, holding the hot dog. This is when that gets way too far. It's just like a funny statue of a muffler man holding a hot dog. But these things, they're getting popular again with the Instagram world, guys. People are coming and wanting to photograph themselves with these types. And those are just, nothing special in the sense, but the red brick road is special. There are hunks of it. That's like an original red brick. There's not much left, but you can see original red brick strips of the road that exist. Do keep in mind, Oz was written in Chicago by Frank Baum, Follow the Yellow Brick Road. His home is right off of Route 66. And he was dealing with currency, gold and emerald, and there's all the metaphors in that book. And Route 66 milks the Wizard of Oz, particularly in Kansas. I promise you'll see the Wizard of Oz motifs everywhere. Let's move to the next one. Missouri. And let's go forward it up. This is called Chain of Rocks Bridge. I only wanted to show it because you all know what the St. Louis Arch is. But this was the original bridge that would take you across the Mississippi. And now it still exists, but it's a pedestrian bridge. It's the longest pedestrian bridge across a river in America. So you can park and walk in and walk back. But St. Louis loses out a lot, guys, to Chicago because they clung to river traffic. And the automobile was the thing. And they kept thinking, and they didn't develop trucking. What St. Louis did build it's where they manufactured Corvettes, the iconic car of Route 66. Corvette, because in 1960s, a TV show was on called Route 66, sponsored by Corvette, who would give the star of each episode was the newest Corvette, and these two young men, vaguely modeled on Jack Kerouac's characters on the road, two guys, G.I. Bill types, got out back from the war, and now they're driving and looking for a new girlfriend, looking for adventure, and they always fumble in. And well done, the show Route 66. But it is worth walking to look at the old bridge. It's a beautiful way to capture the river there in St. Louis, because unfortunately it's very dirty, the river. And I think East St. Louis in Illinois may be the roughest town in America with contamination, and another issue for another time. Now Missouri is trying to really capitalize on this one. They took the motif of an old style come on of Route 66, a curio shop, something strange. And this is big deal right now. It's called Uranus Cafe. And it's packed, it's clean, the restrooms are clean, but somebody greets you, there's how's Uranus? And they sell all sorts of gear. T-shirts, sweatshirts, trinkets. It's a major pit stop, and they're making money. And the guy who owns Uranus shop's the mayor of Uranus. So it's this whole thing. Ted Drew's has been selling frozen custard as the finest on Route 66, and you don't even go to a Cardinals game without hitting Ted Drew's. So anybody from St. Louis know about it? Right? It's just an institution. And it's been there, and it continues to be run. Next one, really quickly on these two, I did want to point out, and I don't have time for indigenous story, which is big on the road, but this idea of big chief roadhouses using Native Americans, particularly once you hit Missouri, all the way to California, they're marketeering Western lore of Native life. And it's a lot to look at. They would make a Navajo dress on the road in the 100-degree heat, wearing all this garb and war feather bonnets, selling, tomahawks made in Taiwan, and I mean, having a look at that side of this is, there's so many reservations, and the trail, now there's a Trail of Tears memorial along Route 66, which is really great looking at. And in Missouri, they built what is officially our National Museum of Transportation. Highly recommend it. You do realize that there is no American history without transportation. Do know that not only did Thomas Jefferson dispatch Lewis and Clark to the Pacific on the core of Discovery and dispatch Zebulon Pike to find the headwaters of the Mississippi River or the headwaters of the Red or Arkansas River, Thomas Jefferson constantly called for what Route 66 is. He called it the Great Road. We needed a great road that would take people, this was pre-automobile, a road that could connect the Atlantic to the Pacific. Of course, the fruition of that came with the railroads when Lincoln creates the transcontinental railroads, and it's worth saying everything in Illinois is Abe Lincoln. Everything. It's the land of Lincoln, Lincoln statues. They prefer Lincoln the Prairie Lawyer and all of their outsider folk art there, but he is the superstar. And they have built a presidential library to Lincoln and go to Springfield, the capital. He lived, unfortunately, in 1908 with that race riot. Here, right my stage is Lincoln's house where he lived with his wife and raised his children on purpose. Just go just a little bit outside of this, it all burned and blacks were lynched in 1908 next to the Lincoln home. And the reason that created the NAACP and all, everybody knew the South had this problem, but in the land of Lincoln, next to Lincoln's home, it had a real impact, particularly with the writer W.E.B. Du Bois. This movie has saved Route 66 in the 21st century. Walt Disney, Pixar movie, Cars. How many people have seen Cars? Anybody? It's a masterpiece of chill, but it's for adults too. It's Paul Newman's voice and others. It's dealing, that movie, that today's Route 66 is 85% drivable. But it shut in 1985 to make way for the interstate super slabs, the Eisenhower highway system. And when they built those highway systems, these Route 66 towns were forlorn and nobody would come to them. And many just went belly up, bankrupt, some struggled. But there's a saying, once a Route 66 town, always a Route 66 town in the psyche of the community. And this movie, just putting, they're all over now on 66 for kids. That's Tomater, you see the eyes and the tooth, and they're imagining them. But what it was saying is how you can come back. It's a movie about resilience. That now 66 is getting huge federal grants. The National Park Service is pouring money in. Each of the states have a commission. Here in California, Newsom's going to do you're going to be hearing about 66 a lot for its 100th birthday out here. It's having a moment, usually due to grassroots groups. Oklahoma, so much to talk about, but I'm just picking on two you all know. Will Rogers is the patron saint of Route 66. He drive it all the time. He promoted it. He talked about it. And it was his link to California, Oklahoma, California. He'd go back and forth. His persona was the Oklahoma cowboy humorist, but he loved living out on the beach, as you know, Will Rogers State Park and Malibu and all of that. His plane went down and he died in 1935. And immediately it went through Congress to change the official name of the highway to the Will Rogers Highway. He lives on in Claremont, Oklahoma. You go to his boyhood home, his house, and he still has a kind of street credibility and not been canceled, certainly in Illinois. He's part Cherokee, and he was great friends of presidents, particularly FDR. Woody Guthrie on that guitar says, "This machine kills fascists." What he wrote the most famously, "This Land Is Your Land." He wrote it as a response to "God Bless America." He wanted a more, the song, from the Redwood Forest and all of that. And it stuck. It's become a must song that Guthrie wrote. It became campaign song for George McGovern, Eugene McCarthy, and others. I mean, it's just become a staple of America. They often cut Guthrie's verses off. He has one verse that nobody would play, where he said, "Well, as I was walking, I saw a sign there, and on that sign it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me." The idea of being able to freewheel and wander in that Depression era. But he wrote the Dust Bowl songs and the like. Bob Dylan, our Nobel Prize winning musician whose movie is hot now, has been doing a series of paintings on Route 66. Those are painted by Bob Dylan. That's Roy's in California. That's still there. And the Blue Swallow Motel, which is still open and worth staying at. The interior and the lighting and all, it is a campy piece of Americana, highly recommended. But he has about 100 Route 66 amateur paintings that he's done, but I wanted to point that out. In Texas, I will just tell you, do go to Palo Duro Canyon State Park. It is like a miniature Grand Canyon, but the hiking trails and the things the Civilian Conservation Corps had designed there for camp spots and all, you don't hear a lot of great praise about Amarillo. Although there's the song by George Strait made, Amarillo by morning, and all of that. But the park there, it should be, if it were a national park, it'd be one of the most visited. So if you go to Texas, Panhandle, hit it. And this is the area where also guys, Buddy Holly and Waylon Jennings and, all these music legends. Okay, I'm just for time-wise moving quickly here. This still exists from the early days. Big Texan. If you eat a 82-ounce ribeye, you get it for free. And it still exists, and particularly guys in the military go in there and they dare each other and to eat the big slab of meat for free. It's a tradition there with beams and all. And so I don't have time to show you the inside. It's like old saloon and all, but it's an institution. Cadillac Ranch by Amarillo. Bruce Springsteen wrote a song called Cadillac Ranch. People go there, outsider art, graffiti where the cars are upside down. There's also now one for Volkswagens and all, and it's coming up outside public art thing. I just want to point out that these two, in particular, Adolfo Anaya is considered the father of Chicano arts. And he is now in the Library of America. He's this extraordinary novelist. One of his is Albuquerque, dealing with Central Avenue, Route 66 there. But his novels are world class. And he lived his life there and writing about Albuquerque. Dolores Huerta, California, we associate with Cesar Chavez. She was born in Dawson, New Mexico, a mining town, and the entire mine town blew up. Only a couple families survived. Her mother and father and her couple kids did. The whole town got wiped out. And they hopped in a car and drove to California to start doing the agriculture picking around Fresno and Delano and all of that. She's now, the most famous Latina activist voice. Some people pick it as the best photograph of the feel of 66, taken in 47. Andre Fenninger is a beautiful photographer, but I just want to point out here, it's again like O'Keeffe, the sky. The clouds are the attraction. You can see here, it's a last stop. That Texaco is now like a Smithsonian relic, that sign. And out of there, guys, out of there goes, you're out in the desert. You better get what you need there. That made it the cover. Robert Frank wrote a book called The Americans. He's one of our great dark photographers of America. He did 66 and saw tragedy on 66, or different side, not non-romantic. But here is a body thrown in dead off of 66. It was known as Bloody 66 because the engineers built it quick, and people, we didn't know enough about speed limits, safety belts, all that. But here, just the locals would come out from those little houses they live in, just stare at the dead body, there as an event. So, and he took these kind of photos and all over their dead man's curves around 66 that people go to now. That is Elvis Presley, born again. And right near there, he was heading up to Flagstaff. He was having a spiritual hard time. His spiritual advisor, a man named Mr. Geller, did his hair. He was his hairstylist and spiritual advisor. Elvis was studying Buddhism a lot, or meditation, and he could not find Christ, or he just couldn't. He found it more in Eastern philosophy. But suddenly he had an epiphany in Arizona. He saw red and blue. He was driving his motor coach and hopped out and made Geller run up a hill. He said, everything's lifted. I feel some magic happened. It all like lifted. And then their car broke down a little later. But Elvis got all this cash and went into LA handing people $100 bills as showing that I'm not Scrooge, or I'm a giver, and it's a true epiphany he had in '66. And with your state, California, and just very briefly, I only show that to remind you, Hollywood, Hollywood, Hollywood. Route 66 opens and Hollywood gets the talkies. The Jazz Singers, 1927. And the movie industry booms out there. I know, Jamie, you know all that industry so well. Disney was Mr. Route 66. He was born in Chicago. An El Salvadorian family lives in his birthplace today. There's no marker. I went to it. Then he lived in Missouri for a while. And then Disney did a Steamboat Willie. He started connecting. And he lured a lot of people to Los Angeles, and of course his theme park had Frontierlands, and he was theming off of how Route 66 did it. So he was a devotee Disney of 66. Ed Ruscha, painter still alive today, from Oklahoma City. MoMA just had his big retrospective. First line in the catalog, Monet had the Sorbonne and the Seine. I had Route 66 from Oklahoma City to Los Angeles. And he photographed every gas station along Route 66, Ed Ruscha. Then he advanced them to a series of standard oil gas stations, and I'm done. This LA County on fire with the recent fires. He's showing the problem that you could see there by Ed Ruscha. And my last two here, these are by an LA painter, Ernie Barnes, who played in the NFL. Sugar Shack is now owned by Eddie Murphy. That painting is worth a fortune now. He was a football player turned painter of black athletes and black life. And Barnes did, and why I'm ending here, 1984, he was the artist hired by the Olympics in Los Angeles. And he did all the Olympic athletes and painted, and so there he's introducing a women's sports with the dunk, a woman doing a dunk in a rural neighborhood. And he's a very underrated artist who's lived in LA. And for here, George Patton and the military and training in the desert, and it became seminal here for armed tanks and our armored divisions. And the importance of 66 to training and moving for the industrial miracle of World War II is intense. And by this, just telling you, that's the end. They have a trinket shop there you can go to. So next time you walk, take it to the very end of the pier, and it's the very end of Route 66. Thank you, guys.